Next news item now. Swedish prof urges eating human flesh to save the climate. So, wow, I was just talking about civilizational decline. And here's a professor that talks about cannibalism as a solution to global warming. So, this was in the context of a conference in Sweden called the Gastro Summit, so the Eating Food Summit. And the Epoch Times reported this Söderlund, Professor Magnus Söderlund. He's a professor of marketing, so take that for what it's worth, spoke on the topic, can you imagine eating human flesh? And he argued for breaking down the ancient taboos against desecrating the human corpse. And there's a clip available on Swedish television that shows him saying this. Söderlund dismissed taboos against cannibalism as conservative. He suggested that people's resistance to eating human flesh could be overcome little by little, beginning with persuading people to just taste it. He thinks that since food sources will become scarce in the future, people must be introduced to eating things they have thus far considered disgusting, among them human flesh. So we see here another instance of using climate alarmism and panic to sneak in all these other agenda, to sneak in a hidden agenda. So the mechanism or the strategy seems to be we make people panic. When people panic, they lose their minds. They disconnect from their reason. And they become like frightened sheep. And you can herd them all into wherever you want them to go. So scare them, then herd them into a place they would never go were they, using their reason. So one of the things that they want people to be herded into is a kind of a communistic world, a socialist situation. So that's St. Greta Thunberg and company. They want people to panic. And then once they've panicked, they will give all their money to the one world superstate to make the scary global warming go away. That's one thing they want to do. And the other thing they want people to do is to get rid of conservative taboos. And so this is just this climate, this ecological scaremongering seems to be just a way for the powerful to get the masses compliant by stoking fear to such a level that reason is no longer used and critical thought no longer used. We just scare the living daylights out of people so that they just become sheep. And he spoke, this professor, about how, we got to break down this taboo bit by bit. Get them to taste meat at first, just to taste it. And then bit by bit, they'll start becoming cannibals. And right on cue, the BBC actually did a documentary in 2016 on the taste of human meat and how it actually tastes. Now, in this documentary, they didn't actually use real human flesh. What they did was they had a laboratory analyze human flesh, and then by the proteins and the molecular structure and so on and so forth of human flesh, they guessed at what the flavor would be, and they created this kind of essence that would supposedly taste like human meat, and they put that essence, that flavor, in a burger patty. And so they have somebody in this documentary taste the burger patty and so on, and just a way of getting people used to the idea of cannibalism. It's a 30-second clip that we have, and so I'll just play it for you right now.
Even if it was legal, I wouldn't want to sacrifice a whole arm to make a real Greg burger. So I've cooked up a mixture of the meat that came up in the analysis of my cooked thigh.
You want a piece of me.
So now I've just got to eat it. It's good. It's like really beefy, bit lammy. I think that's going to be the closest I'm ever going to get to tasting human. I'll tell you what, it's pretty good.
So what is this pattern that we're seeing now? We're seeing every single taboo, every single moral law that humans have always had, that we've always needed to live in society, they're all being questioned, and these taboos are being eliminated. For what? You see, eating human flesh, sodomy, or same-sex relations, abortion, all these things have been trivialized. Euthanasia, killing old people or people who are sick, or suicide even. Euthanasia is also a suicide. It's a murder-suicide. The doctor murders and the person asks for it. And what's next as well with all these child drag queen performances, we're getting people used to the idea of children as sex objects. And what are these comprehensive sex education courses being given all over the place for? Well, so that kids may be respected in their sexuality and that their sexual and reproductive rights may be respected, so that people who deny kids their sexual relations will be seen as conservative and against human rights, because what kind of monster would prevent a child from having his deserved sexual pleasure? And if an adult wants to be the provider of sexual pleasure for that child, who are we to judge? So all this is slowly happening, and what's the end game? What's the end game of all this? Well, ultimately, the idea that there are intrinsic evils, the idea that there's a right and a wrong, and sometimes something is wrong no matter the circumstances, like murdering an innocent person. That's wrong no matter what the circumstances. But they want to be able to tell you, no, there are no intrinsic evils. Everything just depends on what? It depends on what a bunch of rich oligarchs say. That's the end game. It's that morality no longer depends on the truth of the situation. It depends on power. And whoever has the most of it, that is what right or wrong will be. That's the end game. So whatever a bunch of oligarchs want right and wrong to be, we saw with the Epstein case that many of these billionaires and these world leaders have, let us say, exotic tastes when it comes to sexuality. And so they may be sick and tired of having people tell them that having sex with children is wrong. And so slowly they are reconditioning people into accepting that through these different ways, by these drag queen story hours and twerking with kids in the library. So we see that morality is undergoing a paradigm shift from morality, the 10 Commandments, and thou shalt not, and you can't do this no matter what, to what you can or cannot do depends on what a bunch of oligarchs say via the media which they control. And that's where we're going. We're going to a one-world prison totalitarian government where morality will no longer be a case of objective facts and even less of revelation, but will just be whatever the oligarchs say it is at any given moment. And unfortunately, whereas in the past, the Catholic Church has been a bastion of sanity in this ocean of insanity as regards morality, well, we've seen with the sins of the priestly sex abuse scandals that that's not the case in terms of practice, but even worse, in terms of doctrine. When you read Amoris Laetitia 303, paragraph 303, which says that conscience can tell you what's right or wrong, even though what you're doing is objectively wrong, sometimes it's okay anyways. And God approves of it, because that's the best you could do at that moment. Well, something like that means that the whole idea of intrinsic evil is out the window, and sometimes what's wrong, according to the Decalogue, could be right according to your own conscience, and you have to do that. Now, that's nonsense, and that's dangerous. And so we see that the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, the men in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, are being also brainwashed by this moral relativism and are being brought in line with this one world order that wants to eliminate all morality for the sake of the powerful.